good here. Flight good agreement.
Well, we better back off here and think about this one, Houston.
Roger.
They continue to believe that this mission might never get started, and Mission Control was pretty convinced it wouldn't either. First attempt, dock, couldn't get a hard dock. Second attempt, third attempt, fourth attempt, fifth, and a sixth attempt. 2 hours. But it's that spirit in Mission Control, in the crew, the faith and the confidence in their training, and they're able to work together as a team to get that mission going.
I believe I got a hard dock, Houston.
Roger, Al. That's great. Super job, Stu.
This is really a wild place up here.
In the aftermath of Apollo 13, nothing was taken for granted. It took a lot of work back home to really reprogram that software, to really understand what had happened there.
We're on the surface. Okay, we made a good landing. That was a beautiful one. We landed the slope, but other than that, we're in great shape. Yeah, right on the landing site.
Looks like you're about on the bottom step and on the surface. Bedford, old man.
Hamlet's on the surface, and it's been a long way, but we're here.
Apollo 14 was an incredibly ambitious scientific mission. One of the things they had with them that was incredibly important was something called the Met, or the rickshaw. Basically a cart intended to carry both those scientific experiments, those payloads, but also to return those lunar samples. And so that allowed that crew to travel further from the lander than any crew had previously.
We're really going up a pretty steep slope here. We got a ways to go yet.
Like any good navigator, the astronauts brought with them the maps that they needed. But there was a problem with these maps. These maps had been shot from the air, and on the ground, that lunar landscape looked quite a bit different.
Nothing like being up to your armpits in lunar dust.
They found themselves in valleys that were deeper than they thought. They found themselves working up hills that were higher. This was an exploration at its finest.
Well, I'm going to try a little sand trap shot here. That looked like a slice to me, Al. There we go. And one more. Miles and miles and miles.
The samples returned from Apollo 14 were incredibly important. They told us so much about the formation of the solar system, so much about the material that makes up the moon.
Okay, Channel, do a loop. Okay, make it smooth. And around we go. Show us a little style.
The return trip to Earth was a time to rest, a time to reflect, but also a time to continue science. A major portion of that journey home was conducting microgravity science, something that today we do on the International Space Station every day. That was a new way to think about what would the value of space be. Apollo 14 achieved all the science that it had hoped to achieve, and it pressed the boundaries of space exploration in ways that future crews would build upon. And as we prepare to go back to the moon, we've definitely followed in the footsteps of these brave crews that went before us and build upon the scientific information that they returned.
First of all, I'm really happy to be here because I love Montreal. It's like Paris, but you bathe. And it is just so nice to be here. I can't get down the stairs.
You guys have a good dinner tonight? Seriously, I cannot walk down this stair. You go.
Can I help you here?
It's very deep.
Not a problem.
And I worked in their coffee shop as a waitress to pay to go to all the comedy. And and you were very generous because I found out if you limp, Montrealians give you extra tips.
Seriously, I cannot walk down this stair. You go.
Can I help you here?
It's very deep.
Scott and Irwin spent 3 days exploring the Apennine-Hadley region in the lunar rover. There's actually a plaque on the lunar rover vehicle that was left on the moon that says man's first wheels on the moon. The heavy focus on science for Apollo 15 was its primary feature. It was achieved two ways. One, of course, with the lunar rover vehicle on the moon to gather more lunar data. And secondly, the command service module carried a sim bay of scientific instruments that allowed Al Worden to gather many photographs and much data as he circled the moon for his 3 days in orbit. One of the interesting experiments that Scott performed on the moon was to demonstrate Galileo's theory that two objects will always drop at the same rate in an airless environment.
For our Falcon, and I'll drop the two of them here, and hopefully they'll hit the ground at the same time. How about that?
Scott and Irwin, while they were doing their lunar rock studies on the moon, came across a single rock that was determined to be over 4 billion years old. It was called the Genesis Rock. Scott and Irwin spent over 18 hours on the moon, the longest time of any of the Apollo missions at that time, and gathered 170 pounds of lunar material to bring back. They also set out the Apollo Lunar Experiments package. In a private moment, Commander David Scott laid a small aluminum statue of an astronaut on the moon to memorialize the 14 astronauts that had died in the US and Soviet programs. The lunar rover had a TV camera on it, and for the first time we were privileged to see the ascent stage take off from the moon. After Scott and Irwin were back in the command module, they continued to orbit the moon for 2 days, and during that time deployed the particle and field satellite. During the flight back to Earth, one of the most important tasks required of the crew was for Al Worden to EVA from the command module and capture the cassettes that recorded all the data that he'd accumulated during his orbits of the moon. That was the first time at 197,000 miles from Earth that man had ever done a deep space EVA.
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And if it didn't happen, it's nice to know why it didn't.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again. The only limit to a human future is in our own imaginations.
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again. The only limit to a human future is in our own imaginations.
The only limit to a human future
future is in our own imaginations.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again. But going to Mars should be one of the next series of steps that humans do. The first step should be going back to the moon for a number of technical reasons and exploration reasons, and then after that Mars, maybe a high orbit in Venus atmosphere, maybe going to Europa. There's all kinds of targets to go to, places of interest in our solar system. The only limit to human future is in our own imaginations.
Darüber gibt nun dein Urteil ab. Der Welt unterstelle ich mich nicht. Die kann mich nicht richten.
It's an unbelievable moment.
Brandon, you also told me you can hear the chants from the crowd. Let's go, Brandon. And you told me you were going to kind of hang back those two stages and just watch and learn what learned that helped you there in those closing laps.
Oh my God, it was learning how line didn't stay to win. Everything shifted top to bottom so much.
Anti-Joe Biden chants have erupted at the NASCAR Talladega Superspeedway event in Alabama. The video shows winner Brandon Brown giving his post-race interview after banking his first NASCAR Xfinity Series race. The NBC Sports interview can see the reporter telling Brown the crowd is chanting, "Let's go Brandon." But that wasn't the case. Crowdgoers were chanting anti-Biden rhetoric. When it was clear what the crowd was chanting, NASCAR took down the interview on Twitter. Just last week, a similar situation occurred at a congressional baseball game in Washington, D.C. President Biden attended the event. Most of the crowd welcomed him, but there were a few who booed him.
Joe, you suck!
Similar chanting from the NASCAR event happened at college football games where fans turned political.
Joe Biden! Joe Biden! Joe Biden! Joe Biden!
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And if it didn't happen, it's nice to know why it didn't.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond.